That's what. Oh, I knew I should have finished you off, man. Come here so I can just whoop your ass and what it is, what it looked like. I'm always ready. And you are looking at Tears of the Kingdom via an emulator. Now, why am I showing you this? Because there has been an update. Yes, there has been an update in the world of Lossless Scaling. We are looking at adaptive frame generation. As you can see in the top left, 60 to 165, because that is the max refresh rate of my monitor. And just in case you can't see it, I also have it down in the bottom right corner as smooth frames, like I did in my previous video, which you can check out here. So with that being said, let's get into why I believe that this is a game changer for ease of use. Now I'm just going to pull this up for us so you can see exactly how I'm running it. I am on the latest version of Windows, so that's why I'm using WGC as a capture. We're not scaling because the emulator is doing that, and we're running adaptive. So I am going to now switch this. You'll see what I'm doing. I'm switching it to fixed. So you've seen how the game was running there. I'm going to just do a bit of moving around so we can take a look at exactly what's going on. Because it's not going to be so earth-breaking, world-shattering, as it were, but it's definitely going to make this a whole lot smoother to play and a whole lot easier to set up for folks. You feel me? Because a lot of people may not be comfortable with using different programs to cap the frame rate, etc. That is what I do oftentimes, even in some of the examples you'll see here. But I'm going to start moving around so you can see with everything off what I'm working with. Now, later on in the video, I'm going to show you another example of me running this game at 1440p. And the reason that it's locked in right now to 1080 is because I want to show a specific use case when the system can actually handle the load that you're giving it. And then later on, what adaptive is doing when the system is being pushed over, when your setup has a lot less stability in the base frame rate. And that'll play more of a major part. So let me go ahead and turn this on, and then we're going to be on fixed mode. And those who were paying attention there would have seen that I'm actually still in some type of VSync situation, right? I'm tossing the frames out that are above the monitor's refresh rate. So that's why the game system itself is still fairly easy on the GPU and CPU. You could call it wasteful, but I mean, at the same time, it is tossing them out. So this is what you could have been doing the whole time. But we're going to go ahead and turn that off to allow tearing. And then we're going to come back in. And then as you can see, this is going to go all the way up to 180 now. But just look at how smooth this is as a, just as a comparison to when I was just running around and it wasn't on. See how choppy the 60 FPS was still? That hitch was just asset loading. Can't really do much of anything else beyond that. Lossless scaling is not going to fix that per se. But as you can see now, everything is still looking pretty smooth as we move back and forth. I'm going to put it back to default. And so that's why it's showing 60 out of 165, right? So that's traditionally what was taking place. Not every game is going to play nicely with that because, as like I was saying before, like it can actually handle 1080p at this point. But what happens when we move ourselves up to 1440p? Let's find out. And there we go. So let me start moving around a bit so this will pick up. And here you can see the target on the right is 165 frames per second. That dropped because of an asset load from the emulator. And on the left, you can see the input frames that are taking place. So it's maintaining the smoothness of about 165 frames per second on 165 hertz panel. And depending on what is happening on the screen, you can see that dynamically adjusting with what I'm dealing with at trying to run Tears of the Kingdom at 1440p inside this environment. And I really want to showcase this because so much of the conversation is like, oh, well, why would you use, lossless scaling's frame gen over, let's say, FSR or DLSS? And we're talking about a system, a console that's never going to achieve that amount of FPS with a game that is locked to 30 FPS. And here we are giving this a playthrough with the presentation of 165 frames per second with, the game running, at some points it can get up to 60, but mainly in the 40s. And it's really impressive. And that's really where I think this shines the most in these locked scenarios where you're going above what the game can achieve and above a locked multiplier, for example. Because if we were trying to do that in the fixed mode, we would be trying to target 165, but it wouldn't actually output that. I should have recorded that, but what it will do instead is we won't even be anywhere upwards of like maybe 140. It'd be more like 120 or even less, like 110 frames per second, because of the struggle of trying to actually get to that point. Whereas with the adaptive mode that we're in, it actually can get to that point because it's not as necessarily concerned about like the input itself. The breakdown or the caveat to this, I should say, is that because there are more frames on the screen that are generated via lossless scaling, then the image quality will dip, right? In terms of how many artifacts are on the screen. So as you've been seeing when I was moving around, that there are like more blips around the character, more blips around, say, like the hearts in the top left corner. So if that's bothersome, then that's unfortunate. However, let me go ahead and try to play with this really quick to see if this changes anything with the input latency. But I think that it's a worthy sacrifice to the fact that I'm playing Tears of the Kingdom in a way that it will never run on its native hardware. And I think that's pretty awesome. Let me go ahead and switch this back. That Q target really wasn't changing much of anything for what I'm dealing with right now. But you can see there in the bottom right corner as well is that I'm not even maxed out still on the GPU load. Now, if you leave this uncapped, what's also pretty cool is that it also, for increasing the load, it actually compensates quite well for that in different games that I was testing it on. I think like the most that the full GPU load was around 94% at max, versus where like you're just running a game natively and you're just pegged all the way. And I know that people say that you want that to be the case, but when you're doing other things on your system, especially when you're trying to get frame gen, because people always complain about their performance tanking, and that's because there's no headroom. Well, with the adaptive mode, there is headroom because the algorithm that they set up makes room for that process to take place, but it's at the expense of some of these frames dropping. But for Tears of the Kingdom, I mean, 40 FPS for your input latency is a whole lot better than 20. some of the areas where it tanks, and that's all you have to work with. But I mean, just panning the camera around is stunning. But here I'm going to show again where I've turned it off, and you should see kind of like the jitteriness of the game native. Again, we're above 30 FPS. So, we see we've reached up to 60 even. It's dropping back down. So I'm just displaying how this appears natively versus now we're going to kick it back on, and I'm going to turn and pan the camera and do all this stuff. I mean, just it's the presentation. And this is a great example of how you can make the decision between what's more important. For me, depending on what game I'm playing, the way that the game was designed and the pace of it, I'll actually choose this and the smoothness of it over maybe necessarily like the feel. And that's because I'm more of a presenter, right? Like I create videos, I do things like that. And it's more important for me to have the integrity of the smoothness intact versus just saying I'm running a game at 300 hertz and you see all of the inconsistencies or the skips or whatever it may be in the 60 frames per second. But there's more. I'll put a link below for AFG and lossless scaling. Again, I still think it's like the best $7 to $8 wherever you are in the world that you can spend to maximize some of your gaming experiences with old games, with newer ones that are locked like Elden Ring, or even things like emulators, right? Making the most out of all of those purchases. I like it. So I'm going to keep using it, but let me know in the comments what you think. And if you've tried it, let me know. And as always,